It started like any other day on Wall Street, until the truth came crashing down.
Madoff has been sentenced to the maximum 150 years.
$65 billion vanished, and no one saw it coming. He fooled celebrities, banks, charities, even retirees for nearly 2 decades. This is the story of the man who built a $65 billion lie. Meet David, retired teacher, father of 2. For over 2 decades, he believed his money was safe, growing quietly thanks to Bernie Madoff.
Wall Street history. A federal judge ordered Madoff, who is 71 years old, to serve a...
Bernie Madoff, Wall Street legend, arrested today for masterminding a massive financial fraud. In a single morning, David lost everything. His savings, his peace of mind, his future. How did one man fool the entire financial system and rob people like David blind? Bernard Lawrence Madoff was born in 1938 in a working-class neighborhood in New York City. His father tried to make it in finance but never really succeeded. His mother was sharp and resourceful. She taught Bernie how appearances could be power. In high school, Bernie wasn't the top of his class, but he had something else, a deep hunger to make it big. He went to Hofstra University and worked summers as a lifeguard, not just to earn money, but to build connections. Bernie understood something early. Money flows where trust goes. In 1960, with just $5,000 from his savings and a loan from his in-laws, Madoff started his own firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. It was a small operation at first, just him and a few phones in a cramped office. But Bernie had big plans. He innovated, becoming one of the first to use computer technology in trading. Wall Street took notice. In time, Madoff helped shape the very backbone of the stock market's new age. By the 1980s, he was one of the most respected names in finance. Eventually, he even became chairman of the NASDAQ. People trusted him. Hedge funds, charities, celebrities, even banks. They all handed him their money, believing he had discovered a secret formula. He delivered consistent returns, 10 to 12%, year after year, rain or shine. Getting into Madoff's fund felt like getting into an elite club. He turned away clients more often than he accepted them, and that only made him more desirable. You've probably never heard the name Harry Markopolos, but he could have stopped Bernie Madoff a full decade before the collapse. Back in the 1990s, Harry was working as a portfolio manager at Rampart Investment Management in Boston. In 1999, his firm noticed something odd. One of their partner firms had invested in a hedge fund showing profits every month, 1 to 2% like clockwork. That hedge fund turned out to be run by none other than Bernard Madoff. Harry's boss asked him to figure out how Madoff did it, to replicate the strategy. But as Harry dug deeper, nothing made sense. The math was wrong. The trades didn't add up. No one, not even Wall Street's top traders, could pull off results that perfect. Harry came to one conclusion. Either Madoff was trading on insider info, or this was the biggest Ponzi scheme in financial history. In the year 2000, Harry Markopolos walked into the offices of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, carrying documents, calculations, and a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. He laid out his findings. Madoff's numbers didn't make sense. The returns were too smooth, too perfect, too good to be true. But Harry didn't have hard proof, just charts, theories, red flags. And the SEC? They didn't open an investigation. But Harry wasn't alone in his suspicions. Years later, when asked, he confirmed what many insiders already knew. Hundreds of people on Wall Street had doubts about Bernie Madoff. So why didn't anyone speak up? Harry's answer was simple.
Executives at the biggest investment houses in Wall Street that knew something was wrong. Why do you think they didn't go to the SEC?
Because people in glass houses don't throw stones, and self-regulation on Wall Street doesn't work.
By 2005, Markopolos had uncovered even more red flags, enough to raise serious alarms. Eventually, in 2006, the SEC did open an investigation. But the system Harry was trying to trust was already compromised. But Bernie Madoff wasn't just another name to the SEC. He had influence, deep ties within the agency. Sometimes they even asked him for advice. He wasn't afraid of scrutiny. He welcomed it. He knew the loopholes. He knew how to game the system. According to former employees, they used to cool down falsified documents in the fridge, so auditors wouldn't notice the paper was freshly printed. 11 months later, the investigation was closed. The official reason? Lack of evidence. And then, as if mocking everyone, Madoff publicly praised the SEC, saying,
Great job.
You know, in today's regulatory environment, it's virtually impossible to violate rules. And this is something that the public really doesn't understand. But it's impossible for you to for a violation to go undetected. Certainly not for a considerable period of time.
The stakes were deadly serious. Harry wasn't just worried about his career. He started carrying a gun and checking his car for bombs. He realized Madoff wasn't just stealing from wealthy retirees and institutions. He was stealing from the Russians, the Colombians. If they found out, they'd kill him. Somehow Madoff stayed calm, but deep down he must have known. The clock was ticking. By the end of 2008, Wall Street was in chaos. The global financial crisis had triggered panic everywhere. Banks were failing, markets were crashing, and fear was spreading fast. Investors who had once been confident began to panic. They rushed to pull their money out of every fund they could, including Bernie Madoff's. For years, Bernie had always been able to meet withdrawals without hesitation. But now the tide had turned. On December 10th, 2008, Bernie Madoff sat down with his sons. No lawyers, no witnesses, just the family. And there, in that private moment, Bernie revealed the truth. It's all a lie. I've been running a Ponzi scheme for years. Just a day after his confession, Bernie Madoff surrendered because he simply knew there was no escape. His arrest marked the end of an era. One of the largest financial frauds in history had been exposed. Billions of dollars had vanished, and people across the world were left in disbelief. Charities, pension funds, and life savings had been stolen. But the real sting came from knowing that Madoff's closest associates, his clients, were the ones who had been deceived the most. It was a betrayal of unimaginable proportions. To understand how Bernie Madoff's scheme worked, let's take a step back. At first glance, Madoff's investment operation seemed legitimate. After all, he was a well-respected name in finance, with decades of experience on Wall Street. But behind the scenes, things were far from what they appeared. The secret behind Madoff's success wasn't an innovative trading strategy. Instead, it was an elaborate scheme to use new investors' money to pay returns to older investors. This is the essence of a Ponzi scheme. The money from the new investors isn't actually being invested. It's being recycled to keep the system looking profitable. When investors wanted to withdraw their money, Madoff paid them with funds from those who were still invested. This kept the illusion alive for years. Madoff went to great lengths to keep the truth hidden. His office, located in the heart of Wall Street, was carefully designed to give the appearance of a top-tier investment firm. But within the building, there was a secret that only a few knew about. The upper floor of Madoff's office building, the one where the real transactions supposedly took place, was off-limits to most employees. It was a restricted area where only Madoff and his closest confidants were allowed. No one else knew what went on behind those closed doors. This level of secrecy was a red flag, one of the many that Harry Markopoulos would later uncover. Madoff built an aura of exclusivity around his fund. Getting into Madoff's scheme wasn't easy. It was a club reserved for the wealthy, elite, and well-connected. The more selective he was, the more desirable his fund became. But the minute the market crashed, or when too many investors tried to withdraw their money, the whole system would collapse. And that's exactly what happened in 2008. In March 2009, Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal felonies, including securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. He admitted to orchestrating the largest Ponzi scheme in history, a fraud estimated at $65 billion. On June 29, 2009, in a New York courtroom, Bernie Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in federal prison, the maximum possible. The judge called his crimes extraordinarily evil. Madoff, once a respected Wall Street figure, was now inmate number 61727-054. He served his time at the Federal Correctional Complex in Butner, North Carolina. There, he reportedly worked as a prison orderly and spent his days in isolation. No trading floor, no lavish lifestyle. Just a cold reminder of what he had lost. But the punishment didn't stop with him. The scandal shattered his family. His older son, Mark Madoff, took his own life in 2010, exactly 2 years after his father's arrest. His younger son, Andrew, died of cancer in 2014, a disease he believed was worsened by the stress of the scandal. His wife, Ruth Madoff, publicly distanced herself from Bernie and now lives in quiet seclusion. She once said she and Bernie attempted a suicide pact shortly after his arrest, but survived. In April 2021, after more than a decade behind bars, Bernie Madoff died in prison at the age of 82 from chronic kidney disease. His legacy remains one of deception, greed, and unimaginable betrayal.
If you want to watch more such fun and informative videos, smash that subscribe button.